Bienvenidos a Wacom Academy Tour 2019. Como cada año, la marca japonesa Wacom, líder en tecnología de lápiz digital, realiza su famoso Tour Wacom Academy, en la cual invita a estudiantes de arte y diseño con espíritu creativo a explorar nuevas técnicas de dibujo a través de una clase especial. En su paso por México, por primera vez, Wacom Academy se lleva a cabo en la ciudad de Guadalajara como parte de su alianza con universidades, siendo el ITESO, Universidad Jesuita de Guadalajara, la primera sede del Tour 2019. Esta edición de Wacom Academy está a cargo del ilustrador profesional Mike Thompson. Mike Thompson se hizo conocer en el mundo del arte por sus retratos de personajes famosos. Creó también diseños exitosos para empresas como Timberland, Echo y Nike. En los últimos 10 años, sus obras han aparecido en revistas, cubiertas de videojuegos, afiches de película y empaques de juguetes. Sus clientes incluyen a Marvel, Hasbro, Warner Brothers, Dimension Films y Cartoon Network. Como uno de los maestros de la pintura de Corel, Mike ha conducido varios seminarios en línea para la empresa. Su arte y sus técnicas figuran en muchas publicaciones internacionales y en libros como Collage y Pintura Digital de Susan Rudick Bloom y Secretos de los Expertos de Corel Painter de Diane Wilse y Linda Helfries. Mike ofrecerá a los asistentes una clase magistral enfocada en creación de una marca personal y portafolio. Asimismo, realizará una demostración de su trabajo con Cintiq Pro 24, que incluye la famosa tecnología de lápiz digital. Quiero dejar con ustedes al director de LATAM, Jairo Rico. Un aplauso, por favor.
Aló. Hola, buenos días. ¿Cómo están? ¿Nerviosos o no muy nerviosos? No debería haber ningún nervio. Muchas gracias por venir. Estamos emocionadísimos, como bien lo dijo Hugo, y por esa introducción tan bonita. Es la primera sede del Tour 2019. Estamos súper honrados de que nos reciban aquí en Guadalajara. Queremos hacer muchas más cosas en Guadalajara y estamos súper contentos de que ustedes quieran participar de esto. Es nuestra primera vez en Guadalajara. La primera. No podíamos dejar de estar en Guadalajara, ¿o no? ¿No? Todo pasa en México. No, que vengan aquí a Guadalajara, ¿verdad? Quiero presentarles rapidísimo al equipo de Wacom. Para los de Wacom, si pueden alzar la mano o ponerse de pie. Those from Wacom, can you please stand up or raise your hand? Por favor, aprovéchennos. Quiero agradecer la presencia de Don Varga, VP de Américas para Marketing. Un aplauso, por favor. Él, la primera vez que viene. Y todo el equipo de Wacom, los de camiseta negra, todos los que queramos. Mi nombre es Jairo Rico y esto es nuestro Wacom Academy. Estamos súper contentos, tenemos promociones. Por favor, entren con confianza. De haber estado aquí en este Wacom Academy, tienen ustedes precios especiales en, ¿cómo es? Promotion.wacom/Student Week. ¿Lo dije bien? Va. Entonces, por favor, de verdad, es para ustedes, aprovechenlo, disfrútenlo, pregunten muchas cosas y sin más preámbulo, quiero presentarles a Mike Thompson. Viene con todas las ganas de aprender, disfrutar. Please, Mike, welcome to Mexico. Bueno, los dejo, ahora sí con él. Gracias.
Hola. Okay. Sorry. Hola, Guadalajara. That's all I know. So, good night, everybody. Just kidding. Thank you to everyone for coming out and for ITESO for this beautiful venue, for Wacom Academy for hosting me, and I'm just excited to be here. So, with that being said, my name is Michael Thompson. I am an illustrator and digital sculptor. Some of the stuff you've seen on my screen is what I do now, and so I I know that some of you are already Wacom users, some of you are thinking about using Wacom products, and I'm going to get into how they've helped out with my workflow. So I'm going to sit down because I can't walk around a lot, and I will tell you about a little bit about myself, actually. So I'm sorry, bear with me 1 minute. All right, so what I do for a living is I paint illustrations for package design, for movie posters, for toy art, and I got into that by, this is some of my work, I got into that by, from a very early age, I knew I wanted to be an artist. I knew I wanted to draw and paint and do it for a living, but you know, like I'm sure a lot of your parents, I got the, don't be a starving artist thing. So I had to figure out how to get paid and pay the bills and keep the lights on. So I went to University of Maryland, and I was a graphic design student. While I was there, I took an illustration class. And in that class, I learned that making a living as an illustrator was a possibility. Now back then, I'm not as young as I look, but back then we didn't have, really fancy Wacom tablets and computers for me to work on. So I had to do it by hand. I would paint and draw on an illustration, board, and it would take time. But I knew that I wanted to take that and turn it into a career. So it was good practice. A lot of you, if your students will wonder, can you get right into your field out of college? Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. For me, it didn't necessarily happen that way. I was, after I got out of college, I worked in retail. I used to sell leather coats, and that was, that was fine. The good thing about that is it helped me to learn how to interact with my managers and with clients and realize the importance of being able to speak to people. Speaking of that, the fact that I'm on the stage right now talking to you is a pretty big deal, because when I was little, I was really very introverted and shy, and that's why I turned to art. I wasn't great at sports, so I would get comic books. My dad actually would bring home comic books when I got good grades, and so I got to see superheroes like Spider-Man and Captain America and all those guys, and every once in a while, I would get a book that the hero looked like me. So, he'd bring home Power Man, or, Black Falcon. He was Black Falcon back in the day, now he's just Falcon. But yeah, so I would see these guys and I'd be like, wow, these guys look like me, I want to draw these guys, I want to paint these guys. And I would also go to the movies and see things like Star Wars and E.T. and things like that. And I saw these beautiful posters. So, Indiana Jones, an amazing poster. It was done by Drew Struzan, who happened to do all of those posters back in the day. And I would get more excited about seeing the poster than I would the movie. The movies were always really good, but you could see what the movie was about just in that picture. And I knew, that was the turning point for me, that I said, that's what I want to do. I want to be that guy. So just a little bit about where I come from. Let me go to the next slide here. So some of the clients I work for are Nike. I just did a sculpture of a character. I do these paintings, and this was for an ad campaign last year, I believe. The airbrush style, this was all done on my computer using Wacom tablets, and the thing about this that's exciting is they wanted a style that looked like airbrush, and that's how I got started, really. After I got out of college, I bought an Iwata airbrush, and I used to paint things. I would do jean jackets and T-shirts and things like that, and it never looked anywhere near like this, by the way. But as I started getting better, later on down the road, when I started using an Intuos tablet, I was like, I can get the same type of look that I got back in, when I was in school. So that was another driving factor for me to start making that move from traditional artwork to digital artwork. Another client I have is Warner Brothers. So these are some of the pictures that I painted for toy packaging. The one on the end is a Lego superhero movie, Justice League, that if you go to Netflix or whatever, I think they still have that movie poster for it. That's one that I did, which not really my style, but I like it. So that's that. And of course, Marvel. That's why you guys kind of came out, I think. Everybody loves Marvel. The rocket in this one is interesting because this was a test piece I did that got me, it got me Marvel's attention to work on the Guardians of the Galaxy, so the first movie that I did some concept work for, and that was his original costume. This is before I saw what the new costumes would look like, but that was based off of the comic book. Black Panther, of course, that was another test piece. That got me the job for Civil War. The thing about Marvel, you kind of have to reintroduce yourself to them for each movie, but they liked the style of that, and that, moved on to the next thing. And then the Juggernaut is a piece I did for Upper Deck trading cards. So just to let you know about me, I have a bucket list. If you're not familiar, bucket lists are a list of things you want to do before you kick the bucket, right, before you die. So one of the things I wanted to do when I was little, I used to get the packs of superhero cards that had the gum in them. The gum always tasted like it was 1,000 years old, but the packs were cool. And I used to see the artists in there. And it's like, these paintings are beautiful, but they're on little tiny cards. They should be giant. And so I was like, that's what I want to do. And so I was fortunate enough to get a call from Upper Deck, and they asked me to do a series for the X-Men and for Spider-Man. And that's where that piece came from. So cross that off the list. I also do work for movies, movie posters. There's a couple here that actually were used. That Book of Henry came out, I think, last year before last. The Michael Cera movie came out, and they used that one. And the one on the end is for Key and Peele's movie, Keanu. And so a lot of times what will happen is I have an ongoing client that I've worked with for a number of years who reaches out to me and says, there's this movie coming out. Here's some backstage, like pre-production photos. We want to pitch this to the company. And when they do, there's options. They can either go with my version or another painted version. More often than not, they go with photography, but sometimes they use it. And that's the case a couple times. I've done stuff for some of the X-Men movies that didn't get used, but they're always fun to paint. All right, so my first exposure to real artwork and getting paid for it was in t-shirts. So out of college, I decided that I was going to create my first t-shirt. And with that, they weren't these, by the way, way worse than these. But this is for a company called Echo Unlimited, which is a young men's brand. They have the Rhino logo. And so they needed to come up with a character, and that's this guy right here. They wanted him to be non-specific, so he could be anything, and so that's what this guy is. And so I did t-shirts for a number of years. That led into illustration, and all the while I was listening to music. I love hip-hop music, always been a big fan, and I tried to incorporate music and artwork and graffiti, everything into my paintings, whether it's Black Panther or Jay-Z or whatever the movie is. I incorporate all that into a style. So if you look at this piece right here, this was actually done for the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles, California. And so I call this piece the Four Elements. It's based off of the four elements of hip-hop, which is graffiti, breakdancing, the DJ, and the MC. And so I, decided to incorporate that theme into orange, which flows through this piece, and I gave it to them, and they liked it. So that was that piece. But as you can see, tons of hip-hop. This always influenced me. More hip-hop. Okay, and Civil War. So this piece was really a breakout piece for me. I used my Cintiq 27 to paint this. And it was the first time I've done a piece with this many characters. So being able to paint right on the screen was amazing. Before that, I had an Intuos, and I used to paint, with it by my side. But I was able to paint on the screen. It felt much more traditional, which is how I learned how to paint. And, I had the sketches. I think I have the sketches on here of these characters, just so you can see. So one thing about artwork that I love is seeing the process. And that goes for movies and, comic books and all that. I love to see behind the scenes. I always look at the extras first when I buy a DVD. So here are the extras. You guys are the only guys that have ever seen this, by the way. So these pieces right here. Oh, there's a laser pointer on here. Sorry, I forgot. Look at that. Sweet. So this Iron Man right here eventually became this guy over here. Oops. Still getting the buttons down. This guy. So you can see that this sketch was the initial thing that I pitched to the client. In a few minutes, what I'll do is I'm going to present to you what I call a client brief. I didn't call it that. It's actually called that. But I'll show you how it works. So if you're interested in being a freelance artist or even working in a studio, more often than not, you'll get what the client wants you to make, and I'll show you the process of it. But yeah, the sketches are here. All those characters are the ones that are in the piece. Only better. So that's that. All right, so the process. I don't know if any of you are familiar with a show called Battle of the Planets, but that was something that, I'm really old, so back in my day, that was a cartoon that came on, and it was a Japanese cartoon where these kids would, they had their spacesuit that they'd put on, and they fight the bad guys. And so initially what I did was this character right here, which is Princess, and she was my first, one of my first digital sculptures. I decided that I wanted to do the whole team. There's 5 guys. And so I wanted to do this character named Keop, which is this little guy right here. And so this is an example of what you would get from Nike or, Warner Brothers, Marvel, whatever. They usually give you an image that it's a mood board. And what it has is pictures that they would like to see incorporated into your piece. Usually it's either photos or it's, artwork, the style that they want. And that's what this piece was for me, even though I did this for myself. So I had one of these little characters you can buy. It's a whole bunch of parts of articulation that you can pose him. And so I've got the general pose, and then I sketched it. Okay, then I did a really rough of the character, and this is using a program called Zbrush. Again, I did this all on my Cintiq. So the Cintiq I have now is kind of baller. It's a 32-inch Pro. It's killer, actually. It took me a long time to get to that status. I started on the low end with the 6x9 and worked my way up. But everything I do now is on that. So I sculpted this, and you can see that it's starting to get some detail. And then a little more detail. And then I took the render into Photoshop, and I sketched on the lines that I wanted for his suit. And then this would be an example where you would send it to the client, and they would say, okay, I like this, but change this. Or, this is working for me, and I want you to push the pose or whatever. This is the final piece. So better dynamic angle. I finished all the details on the helmet, added all the little details on his chest and all that stuff. And so that would be what I would send to the client, and then they would say, hey, that works for me, or change something else. And then, once it's approved, it goes out the door. Right? So an example of the difference between how I work now with a Cintiq and how I used to work before I had a Cintiq it's not even close. So when I used to do paintings, like I said, they were all hand done. It would take me forever for the paint to dry and the colors to, be exactly how I want. Then I'd have to send that off and it would get scanned. And then once that's scanned, they would send that to whoever is going to do the reproduction, so a magazine, newspaper, whatever. And you have to just hope that those colors remain the way that they were when you painted it. A lot of times they shifted, things got really dark, it got really ugly, and you didn't have any control over that. Now I cut out all that stuff. I also saved myself a lot of time. So that's the other thing. If you're going to be an artist for a profession, the one thing you have to worry about more than anything else is your deadline. The deadline never moves, and it's always over your head. And so with something like this, if I had done this traditionally, I would have sculpted it out of clay or whatever, given it to the client. I would have had to go in and make changes. I would have shipped it to them, and there's a very good chance it might have broken, and then I'm stuck, right? With this, because it's a digital file that I did on my computer, and I use my, my tablet to paint it, or to sculpt it rather, I'm much more freedom to go in and make changes and experiment, be more creative. So I think that's what, these products really do, is they help you just play around and have fun and come up with ideas, right? That you didn't have the luxury to do that before because you didn't have the time. Anyway, that's that. All right, this was a piece that I did for Wacom a couple years ago. They made a video of the process, but it was fun. They came to my studio and filmed back when I had my 27, and it's Spider-Gwen, which is another, if you're a big comic fan, you know who she is, right? If not, check her out, she's dope. All right. This is another piece I did. I did this one for Pixelogic. They make Zbrush, and that's who I use to do the sculptures. So one of the things about my workflow now is I love to, it's interesting. The more I do artwork, the more I want to expand. And so, I started drawing, and then once I got comfortable with color, I started painting colors. And at first, it was very, that was real intimidating to me at first. I don't know if you guys felt this way at all or not, but with pencils, you don't have to worry about messing up colors. Color theory was one of those things that I'm still kind of, I don't think you ever completely learn it, right? But I'm still getting better at it, right? You never stop learning as an artist. So I got color down, and then I decided I was going to, illustrate. And I quit my job and became a freelance artist, and had many arguments with my wife on how we're going to pay the bills. And I initially got, I got my first client, which was a good one. I lucked into getting a Coca-Cola commercial. So got a call from them one day. I was in a drive-through at McDonald's, and I got a call from the company called Burrell Communications. It's one of the largest African-American ad agencies in the U.S., in Chicago. They're Chicago-based. They called me up. They were like, "Hey, Mike, we like your work. Would you like to be, would you like to paint a picture for a Coke commercial? And also, would you like to be in it?" And I said, "Who is this really?" So they were real, happened to be real, and so I did the commercial. And that led to, people saw that. Once I got that first client, people wanted to work with me now. So that's just the one thing. You got to be persistent, you have to be patient, and initially, eventually, you'll start to get work. So this piece, the reason I started this whole long conversation is, this is a piece that I started a different type of workflow. With my paintings, the one thing I need always is plenty of reference. And I usually go on to Google and do searches. I have tons of books, tons of magazines, and they're all really good. But one thing that I realize is, if I have a pose in mind and I find a whole bunch of different pieces from online or magazines or whatever, and I Frankenstein all those things together to my pose, the lighting is always different, right? I might have a guy who's lit from the front for the arm, but the other guy might be lit from the side, and that's going to be the body. And so you have to figure out the lighting. that was always an issue because it takes time. It's not easy figuring out how light wraps around things, for me anyway. So what I did was I started using an old program that's still around called Poser back in the day. And it allowed me to take these, it's almost like action figures, but it's on the screen, and you can move them however you want and then light them. And I use those to, let me go back a little bit. So I use those for these pieces, right? This is before I knew Zbrush. So back in the day, I set up those guys. They looked nothing like this, but it allowed me to figure out how this guy is going to look like he's actually leaping off of the other guy's hand. And it worked for a while. It was pretty good. But later on, I decided I was going to move on and continue to learn how to use 3D applications. And that led me to the process I have now, which is this one, right? Where I'll sculpt something, and if I need it for an illustration, I just do a really good render, like this. Okay? And then I can go in and I can paint over top of it and add my colors. So none of this color information was in the sculpt. This is all still the same process I would use if I didn't have it, but I do know how the light is supposed to react. And because of that, I can see that under his arm, it's blown out. You have that light area that I could translate into, this highlight over here. And it's really, it's kind of how I work now. So you see the original statue or the sculpture, the arm, and then the paint over. And again, this is another one that I did on my Cintiq. And by doing that, I could paint right on the screen. So that was really fun and easy. Okay, I think that's all the slides. But I'm not done talking. I'm going to look at my paper here because there's a lot of stuff to remember. Okay, inspiration. Let's talk about inspiration. So as an artist, you have to have big imagination, right? And you have to be inspired by things to want to create, right? You also have to want to create in the first place. One of the worst things to look at is a blank canvas. So where do we get inspiration from? Well, if you're like me and you happen to be a nerd, you watch a lot of superhero movies, and you read comic books, and you stay out of the sunlight as much as possible, just that kind of stuff. But you find inspiration all around you, right? I could watch The Matrix and get, inspiration from that. I could read Spider-Man and get that. And that's what I did. I incorporate all that stuff. Music is another really big one. So I love to listen, like I said, I love to listen to hip-hop. Not so much the stuff now, because I'm an old dude. The stuff my kids listen to, I don't understand it. But, back in my day, I used to love the music. It was good. So I listened to that. And I put all that stuff in a blender and put it together, and then I throw it at the canvas. And whether I'm painting a rap artist or Michael Cera or, the Hulk, whatever, I like to apply what I call a stylized realism. So that's my style, right? And the hardest thing for me when I was in school and I decided I want to be an artist for real was finding a style, right? Because you look at people, and they have a very distinct style, right? You look at their stuff and you're like, oh, that's that guy, or that's the work of this person. When I started out, I didn't know what I was going to do, right? I didn't know what my style was going to be. I would look at people and I would like their style, so I would copy it, and that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But eventually what will happen is you say, I like the realism of a comic artist like Alex Ross, right? But I like the painterly style of one of the older artists like Norman Rockwell, right? You put all that together and you kind of blend it into your own thing. So what I like to do on my pieces is I love to make them look dynamic, right? So for this piece right here, it's a Ninja Turtle, but you might be thinking to yourself, why does he have all of his brother's weapons, right? Well, I put a story with that. This is just my piece, but The thing about him is, this is Mikey. If you know anything about, who knows about the Ninja Turtles? Anybody? You guys familiar? Okay, all right, cool. So you know Mikey is always playing around, he's always messing around, he's a jokester. So in my piece right here, it's kind of dark, so be careful. But he was playing around, and his brothers all got killed. So, pretty bad, right? It's terrible. He felt bad. So what he did was he got a tattoo of all of them on his arm, right? That's that right there. And that's taken off the old 80s cartoon or 90s, whatever it was. And I got that style directly from that. And you can see he got like a nasty little cut on his chest. But he got all of his brother's weapons, and now he's like the kick-butt guy. Like now he's not playing around, he's going to avenge his brothers, and that's why he looks the way that he does. Right? So that's, I put a story with things, even when it's a client piece, right? They come to me with a brief, they know what they want, but it always helps to put a story to it. You know, so when I got the brief for Civil War, I got a lot of images of set photos and what the costumes were going to look like and the actors, and everything had my name stamped on it 1,000 times, so if it ended up getting out into the public, I would get hunted down and put in jail. But that, you know, that only goes so far. When I put that piece together with them running at each other like that, I was thinking of the old X-Men cartoon, where they would have the X-Men on one side, they have Magneto's guys on the other side, and they're about to clash. And I was like, that's dope. I want to do that. So I did that with mine, right? I didn't make it up, but they thought I did. So I was a genius. And I was like, I'll take that. Thank you. You know? So yeah, inspiration comes from everywhere. Like I just said, it came from a cartoon. What else do I have here? Let's see. Okay, so a little bit of history. Like I said, I graduated from University of Maryland, had a graphic design degree, and I knew that I didn't want to be a graphic designer. I like, you know, making logos and things like that, but it's not really my thing. I can do it if I have to. So I think I told you the other aspect. I'm going out of order here. You guys got to bear with me. Let's see. All right. So there was a breakout moment that that allowed me to go from working for a company and just being an artist to having the confidence to get out on my own. And even before the Coke thing went down, I was painting hip-hop artists like Method Man, DMX, and you know, guys like that, Mos Def, for the company Echo. And I had at the time, I had the small tablet. It was like the 4x6 Wacom Tablet at my desk. I'm just painting guys. And they decided that they wanted to expand the company's awareness. So they came up with their first budget to do an advertising campaign. That campaign included the hip-hop artist standing next to these blocks, right? The blocks were like this tall, maybe 3 of them. And on those blocks, you had pieces of them, like crops. So it might be their face here, and then a part of the clothes here, like a jacket, and then the shoe down at the bottom. And it was my job to paint those guys and put it on the blocks, and they would stand next to it. And that was a campaign. It was really popular. It actually blew up. And so some of the artists I had talked about earlier, that thing was like, so the look of that piece was primary colors. So if I painted DMX, it was all yellow, and I would go in and I'd put browns on him to make him pop. If it was somebody like Prince Paul, it was in reds, you know. So you would look at the piece and you'd be like, okay, those are vibrant, the colors look good. You may or you may not know who the artist is, but you knew you wanted to know more about it. And you would see the clothing on there and you'd be like, I kind of like that jacket. I want to know more about it. So I have a funny story about that, actually. So I got to meet a lot of these guys. And because I was a fan, it was great, you know. I met Method Man. I was telling this story at breakfast this morning. So I met Method Man, and he came into the studio, and he's real thin. Dude's really skinny. So back when we were doing it, all of the clothes were oversized. So we didn't have anything that fit him. So we went into wardrobe. They gave him some pants, the smallest pants we had. They gave him a jacket, a hat. And he put on the pants and cinched them up as tight as he could, and they still fell down. So the photographer was there. He's like, listen, just go with it, man. He had the pants down around his ankles and a giant Echo sticker, and he's like, it was the best ad ever. So I took that and painted it and put him next to it, and to this day, people still love that ad. And it all just came naturally, like he really couldn't wear the clothes. So, anyway, that is some of, that's kind of when I started to get the idea that I could do it for myself. Right. Okay, so how long have I been using Wacom products? Really for a long time. I started probably around 20 years ago with my first tablet. It was an old ADB Intuos, like the round connection they don't even make for computers anymore. And I remember hooking that up to my Mac at the time. I had like this, what I thought was a great Mac. It was terrible. But I was able to paint things, and I was happy. And that showed me that, okay, I can do this now. Before that, I had a mouse. It's ridiculous. If anybody has tried to paint with a mouse, you know that's the worst feeling ever. Or sculpt with one, really. So when I started using that, I was like, I like this. And this is all I can afford now, but I'm going to save, and I'm going to get the better one. And I would do that. And after a number of years, I looked at my collection. I've got like 6 tablets. Each one is better than the last one, but I'm like, I'm not getting rid of any of them. I'm keeping them all just in case something happens. I have a backup. I got a lot of backups. And I remember working on a project for Hasbro. We were doing the return of G.I. Joe. It was the Rise of Cobra, I think. The movie just came out. And I had to paint the packaging for all of the toys. It's a lot of toys. It's like, 30, and I had to paint 20 of them. And I only had, I think I had 3 months to do all of them. And you've seen, like, my stuff is it takes a while. Like, a piece like this can take me 2 weeks to paint sometimes. So I didn't have that. So I'm like blazing through pieces and spending 14-hour days painting, Destro and, Scarlet and all these things. And I noticed, that was back when I had my 6x9 tablet, I noticed that because my hand was in the same place, and I'm painting, I'm looking at the screen, my wrist started hurting. And I was like, wait a minute, this is not good. I had met somebody who had surgery for carpal tunnel the year before, and he got through it, but he still wasn't as good as he was before. So I had to really take stock in that. I'm like, listen, this is my career. If anything happens to my hand, I got to change, to a different job. And so I didn't want to do that. So I was spending 14-hour days painting and painting and painting. Somebody's got to make the donuts. I'm making the donuts. I'm putting them out, painting stuff. Got all my deadlines done, got a really nice paycheck, and I woke up in the morning, and my fingers were tingling, and my wrist was hot. And I was like, uh-oh, I think I overdid it. So I went to see somebody, and they said, listen, you don't have the repetitive stress disorder yet, but you could get it if you keep this up. You have to do something different. That's when I decided I was going to buy a Cintiq, because having the tablet down by me, as awesome as it is, if you're bad about taking breaks like I am, always, take breaks, guys. Seriously, that's a good idea. I didn't take breaks, and it almost blew my hand out. So I bought a Cintiq. I bought one of those arms that would hold it in place at the time, and now I can move it around. I can put it in different places. So now, instead of painting down here, I'm painting here, which is where I'm supposed to be. And it felt like back when I was first starting out, when I was painting with real brushes, real paint, and I had a piece of paper in front of me, canvas. That's what it felt like. And I was like, I want to do this for a living now, because I loved it before, I was making money before, but now it didn't hurt. And I could spend hours and hours painting and creating and, just experimenting. And so I did. And, now I have more clients and I still have the use of my hand, thank goodness. And so anyway, that's my story. All right, so how am I doing on time? Wow, I'm doing pretty good. Okay, I did not think I could talk this long, and I didn't think you would listen this long, more importantly. So, the process. All right, so let's talk about the process a little bit. I told you a little bit about it. Let me show the Black Panther? Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to open up Zbrush and show you this thing that I started playing around with. It's a little guy you might be familiar with named the Black Panther. All right. So this is something I just kind of got started on. Right? You can see starting to come together. Still a little soft, but I have the pose the way I want. I have the face the way I want. And I'm just going to keep detailing them a little bit. And I think while I'm doing this, it might be a good time to do some questions. Like I can talk while I'm painting or while I'm sculpting. I'll get a sip of water here. So maybe if you guys have any questions about anything, I can answer. That'd be great. Figure out how to get this on. How's this going here?
Hello. Hi. How
Hey.
do you store all your creations? On the cloud? Do you buy like
That's actually
extra hardware or something?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I've done it a number of ways. I used to buy hard drives, and I'd store it on there, but they always they would break at some time, usually the worst time, and so I would lose my information. So what I did was I started doing what's called redundant backups. I would have a physical hard drive. I would store it on my computer as well in a different place, and I got cloud storage. So the way I work right now actually is I have an account through like Dropbox, and the great thing about that is it allows me to save. It saves every time that I save. It saves like a different image, and so if I decide that I have to go back, I can look in the history, and I can pull that up. That saved me one time. I had a project I was working on for I think it was a movie poster, and it was coming together. It was looking really good. It was due that day, and the file got corrupted. Excuse me. The file got corrupted, and I lost everything, and I was freaking out because the version I had saved before that was the day before. It was like a day or two before that. So much progress had been made since then that there was no way I was going to make my deadline. So what I ended up doing is I went on Dropbox and I looked in their history, and it had saved like 5 minutes before the crash. And so I had everything. I turned it in, made my deadline. Everybody was happy. So that's one way. One thing I like to do when I am sculpting these guys is I will turn the texture on and off. So right now, if I turn off the color, it's easier to see him. I can also solo him out, and you can see kind of just what I'm working with here. Let's see. Sorry. Stop it. This one.
Hi, Mike.
Hey.
I have a question. Like, how do you start the process of digitalizing your artwork? I want to start by traditionally drawing it, scanning it, and drawing it like on the tablet.
Yes.
Do you think that's a good method, a bad, or do you recommend like another way?
No, that's a great way, actually. That's the way that I used to do it, and I do recommend that. The only thing now is I find that I have such tight deadlines, and I'm working on projects that turn so quickly that I just do the sketch right on my screen. And you know, you can do it just as rough and as fast as you would on paper. You don't have to scan it, so you kind of cut out a step and you save time. And then I'll take that piece, that layer rather, and turn down the opacity on it. Maybe I'll assign a color. Like, again, I'm coming from this comic background. So I'll take that original really rough, ugly sketch and fill it with blue, right? So the line is now blue. And I'll turn down the opacity, and I'll start drawing on top of it with a clean line. I just had to do this for this Ghostbusters piece I'm working on. I'll draw on top of it with black, and I'll clean it up. So you can do it. There's no wrong way to do this. There's no way you're going to do it and break anything or hurt yourself. So just experiment and find out what's best for you. But yeah, that's a great way to get started. Yep.
Hi. Here.
Hey. The speaker's here. I'm like, yeah. Hey.
I also love movie posters, and I would like to focus on making movie posters too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a beginner, so I would like, I don't know, any tips or which programs to use or how to learn even better to make them.
Definitely. Well, do you have a tablet right now? Oops.
No, I'm working on my laptop.
Okay.
But here they lend me some tablets and a pencil too.
Yeah. So if you can get yourself a, I think the Intuos is not that expensive, just so you can work on it. That's a great way to get it right onto the screen. I would say reference is key. Look at people whose style you really like, and kind of mimic that. I had mentioned earlier Drew Struzan. He's an amazing artist, and he's done everything. Like, this guy has painted every poster that's ever been, like, really popular. So just look at people whose work that you like, and, until you really feel comfortable with your own style, just try to emulate them,
Hi.
Mm-hmm. Hi.
Okay, I have a 10-year-old daughter here, and she likes to draw so much.
Nice.
She's very good at it, I think. Okay, she wanted to ask you, how long does it take to draw the Black Panther suit?
That is a great question. Too long. Way too long. So that piece had, there's so many shapes on it that were curved around his body that I was worried that I wouldn't be able to figure it out. I had 2 weeks to turn that in, to get it done, but I was really cranking away to get it, to finish it. The thing about time, until you have somebody that is paying you and is telling you, I want it now, take your time, enjoy it. The thing about artwork is you got to love it. More than anything else. When it becomes a job, then it's not fun anymore and you don't do it as well. I've had those kind of jobs. So I would just say really have fun with it. And even if you finish and you look at it and you're like, I don't like this part, and you want to erase it or even start all over again, do it. You want to be happy with the finished piece. So yeah, take your time. And I would love to see some of your work at some time. If you want to email me, I can get you my stuff. I'd love to see your daughter's work.
Yeah, I want to ask you, I like comics, like I love it. I want to make them. And I want to ask you, where was your moment that you want to give up? It happens one time to you that you think that everything was over and you cannot continue with this?
With creating artwork?
Yeah.
Well, the hand thing was tough when I thought I was going to physically not be able to do it. That was a really tough time. but I think maybe what you're asking me is running more into mental blocks, like when you think that you just can't create. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
No, is that moment that you really think is like your worst moment, that you are going to quit in this because you are not good in it?
Oh, that was early on. That was every day, actually. you know, like I look at people's stuff now. So I was talking about inspiration earlier, and I love to go to ArtStation and see people's work. They're normally maybe half my age, and they're amazing, like killing it. There's a lot of people. I saw one guy on there so there's a friend of mine, his name is Ramel Chopra. He's a sculptor, and one of the best sculptors I've ever seen. And I would be surprised if he's 23. I don't think he's that old, but he's amazing. So I look at these guys, and I know that if I don't continue to do what I'm going to do, I'm going to be left in the dust, you know? So that's why I'm always inspired to keep getting better. I think that as an artist, if you stop learning, if you stop trying to progress, if I was to wake up one day and say, hey, I've made it, I don't need to be any better than I am today, then I'm done, you know? You're not relevant anymore because you're only as good as your last piece. So I would just say that when you have those days, you got to push through them. You know, there's somebody named Ryan Kingsland who's a sculptor who I actually started learning Zbrush because of him, and he has this term that he calls the Valley of the Suck, right? And we've all been there. There's always a point in every one of our pieces that we're not happy with it. We're like, this sucks. You got to keep going, keep pushing through it. And the guy or the girl who can push through that and makes an amazing piece, they're the ones who are going to be the really great artists. A lot of people just give up. So I would just say, you know, ignore those days, push through them.
Hey, I have two questions.
Yes.
What software do you use for rendering? And your models, how many millions of polygons do you use, or you make a red topology or something?
Yeah, well, for my stuff, I don't really use super high poly models. I have a piece now, I think I can find it on here. Let me check real quick. I'm working on this Hulk that I'm sculpting, and he's super detailed. Do I have it on here? All right, this is the original. So this is what he looked like. He's more detailed than this now, actually. But what I do is when I'm sculpting my statues, I use Zbrush. You were asking about software, by the way. That's what I use. I'm not a really good 3D, 3D person. So if you were to give me Maya, I can find my way around, or Max, I have no idea, and Blender, I don't know anything about. But if I'm using something that kind of feels like it could be painted, like Zbrush, I can go in and I can just paint up the the volumes or erase away the volumes. So that's why I like it so much. I don't really use super high poly models. If we look at this Black Panther right now, I'm getting pretty good detail, and this is only, where is the poly count? If I hover over it here. Yeah, so right now it's, well, this is 2 million, right? But if I go down a little bit, let's see. Lower res. Yeah, so you can see, like, if I lower the res on this, you can still see a lot of those details, and I'm only at this point at like 17,000. So I save all that. Like, I don't divide my models up really high until I'm doing something like putting in skin pores, or, if I'm doing clothing, I need to put in the weave of the fabric. And that does two things. It's going to save me a lot of processing time, and it's also going to make it so that I can focus on the shapes. So I sculpt like I paint. I always go big to little, and I'll put in the large muscles, and then I'll work in the smaller muscles, and I'll work in the veins, and I'll work in the skin pores. Everything is going from, macro to micro when you're working, and that's just how I do it.
Hi, Mike.
Hey.
I'm a young artist, and I would like to start in comic books, but I don't know how to do it. If you have some tip for me, I will appreciate it.
Sure. So for comic books, I have a few friends that are comic book artists, and I would say to work on your portfolio, right? That was always something that scared me when I was younger. Like when I was in college and I heard the word portfolio, I got really nervous because I took it way too seriously, right? Of course, you want to put forth your best work, but the thing about it is I was always worried that I would put in a piece that would make all my other pieces kind of not relevant. You obviously want to have the best stuff in there. So I would say for your comic art, do something that showcases what you can do. If you do inking, put a bunch of really nice inked pieces in there. If you're doing pencils, do that. If you're a colorist, do that. But once you do that, you can go to these Comic-Cons and show your work and meet artists and meet people who are in the industry. And a lot of times, the great thing about working now as an artist is you have access to everybody, right? You can reach out to anybody on Instagram, on Twitter, whatever, and they hit you back. Like a lot of these guys will call you back. There was a guy I reached out to the other day on LinkedIn that was with, who was he with? I think he was with like LucasArts. And I was just like, hey man, I love your stuff, and I just wanted to reach out and say what's up, and can you put me in your network? And he reached back to me and was like, he goes, hey Mike, thanks for reaching out. He goes, I'm a fan of your work. I was like, are you kidding me? Really? Wow, that's crazy. So it's not really crazy. I'm pretty dope. I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. Am I? No. So anyway, no, he hit me back, and he was, he was very friendly, and he was like, I'll introduce you to some other guys. It's once you start to network and get your work out there, then it's endless possibilities. That's how I got a lot of my clients, actually. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Hi, I want to know, how do you manage to capture the essence of a character besides the details and the mood boards?
Oh, that's a good question. I gotta think about that. So the way I work, whether it is with comic-based art or music or whatever, is I like to have my subject kind of playing in the background. So perfect example is if I'm working on a painting of Jay-Z, I'll put on my favorite Jay-Z album, and I'll just let that run in the background. And as I'm listening to him, I'm looking at pictures of him, and I'm imagining videos of him, and I'm painting him, right? So the same thing goes with like Captain America. When I was working on that Civil War piece, or Black Panther, I'll look at, I'll rewatch the movies. Like I've bought every one of the movies, and I'll go back and I'll study it. It's almost like watching, a sports tape over and looking for things. So I'll watch all the extras, and I'll go back and watch the movie again, and then I'll look at like little parts, and I'll stop them, like that part in the airport where they're all fighting, and Spider-Man grabs Captain America's shield and grabs it, like whips it and then pulls it up and grabs it. That's crazy to me. Like, first of all, I looked at all those old Spider-Man movies, the ones with Tobey Maguire. He never looked that good. So, I'm looking at him, and I'm like, why does he look this good? Why does he look this good? It's because they got rid of all of the noise, right? So he had the webs that were on top of his thing, and they were big and bulky, and, the colors were all muted because they wanted him to look, rough. And no, they didn't do that. They made his colors super vibrant. And they got rid of the raised webbing, and they made it thinner, and they put it, just black lines on his suit, and he looked like a page of a comic book. So if I have to paint him, I'm looking at that, and I'm saying, that's a Spider-Man that I want to paint, and I'll just kind of transition it into my own work. So that's it.
Hi. My questions are a little bit more technical. I have two.
Okay.
When you start posing your characters, do you start with a T-pose, or you sculpt the character already into pose?
Yeah, so that, I always start with a relaxed pose. It's not really a T-pose. It's more like an A-pose, so his arms are kind of relaxed. And then I'll stay in that as long as I can. But I like to break symmetry pretty early, and I'll go into the pose. So for this guy, he originally, I solo this, he originally was this, right? Shift. So pay no attention to the gang signs on his hand. I don't know what that's about. But yeah, so this is kind of what, I was working on the musculature, and I sculpted him up in this pose, and then I was like, I like it, but I know that when I pose him, a lot of these muscles are going to get warped, and I'll have to resculpt it anyway. So I didn't care. I got it to this point, and I was like, all right, I'm going to get to a decent pose. Right? So then I kind of got him looking like this, and I was like, all right, it's a little closer. And then I started sculpting on top of it and really made it more dynamic, and that's when it started to come together. So I generally break symmetry as early as I can. It adds more time a lot of times because instead of sculpting one hand, now I'm sculpting two hands. And instead of doing 5 fingers, now I'm doing 10 fingers. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things that, for me, if I get them in the action pose, it makes me feel more into what I want the final piece to look like, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, actually, you just answered my second question. What to do with when you break geometry and how to approach it more efficiently.
Yeah. So it's not always the most efficient thing, right? I mean, obviously, if you are, one thing that, I have friends that instead of doing it the way that I do it, they'll pose them in that, the symmetrical pose, and they'll put a rig inside of them. So, I mean, I know for a lot of you guys, you're like, what is he talking about? If you're not into 3D, they'll put basically a skeleton in there, and now you can move his arms around, and it makes sense, and they don't lose the detail. You know what I mean? So like that's another way to approach it. I know you were saying that you use 3ds Max, right?
No, I use Maya.
Maya, okay, yeah. All right. So yeah, if you use Maya, then you could do that, and then go back into Zbrush and clean it up.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. I wanted to ask if you wanted to avoid hurting your hands and you don't have a tablet like the one you have right now. Is there an alternative? I was thinking maybe grabbing a normal tablet and putting it in an angle closer to the monitor.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you could do is you could buy, I know that, in fact, when I was on I did a similar thing like this for Wacom in China. And while I was there, they gave me a stand for my Mobile Studio Pro that was adjustable, and so I could do different angles for it. And I noticed that was really good. So you can change those. I don't know why I didn't put something under it and just do it. I wasn't thinking. But yeah, you could do like some little cheap solutions to fix it, or just go and look on Amazon and see if they sell something. I'm sure they do, that you can change the angles, or turn it. You know what I mean? Like, I always had, I don't know what I was thinking about. So I always had the tablet here, right? And I was looking at the screen here, and my hand was here. So I'm only moving this much, and it was destroying my hand. So yeah, just move around. You can totally do that.
Thank you.
You got it.
I have a question here too. I was wondering, what do you think about VR and digital illustration with digital sculpture?
I love the idea. I'm very into new technology, and I love gadgets, right? So I would love to try it. My only thing is it has to make sense for me, right? So the barrier to entry on VR is you got to buy the headset, you got to buy VR compatible graphics card. You have to have the hand puck things or whatever those things are called, and it starts to add up, right? So I've seen people using it. I have friends that actually do that, and watching them sculpt in VR is really cool. But for me right now, it wouldn't make sense. If you have it and you already, like, maybe you have it for the games and you want to sculpt in it, I would say yeah, definitely, because it looks very cool.
All right, thank you.
You got it.
Hey, Mike.
Hey.
Well, first of all, I was wondering, just by curiosity,
Which is your favorite superhero?
Absolutely. That is a good question. Wolverine is my favorite.
Oh, nice one.
Yeah.
And as well, I was wondering, from all the work that you have done, which one is like the piece that has challenged you more, or it has represented like a difficult?
Definitely. That was that Civil War piece, because that had not only the most characters that I've had to work on, I also did not have reference for the poses. So I had to sketch them out, and then I had to just kind of figure it out so that it made sense, right? Normally what I would do is I would have some type of a thing like this where I could go in and I'd say, all right, well, I can look at this and I can see that this leg needs to be longer, or his arm needs to be higher, or something like that. Or I would maybe grab my son and be like, hey, get in this pose and let me take some pictures of you. And he'd be like, no, I don't want to do that, Dad. So, that's normally how I work. For this, I didn't have that luxury and I didn't have the time. So I was kind of blazing through it, and I actually changed the way I worked. So I was, I said I was on the, I was on my Cintiq, but normally I work in a program called Corel Painter. This time, because something was going on with the application, I was in Photoshop. I started on Photoshop a long time ago. Long story short, I kind of enjoy Painter more. But anyway, went back to Photoshop, and I, for the first time, worked in grayscale first. So I did value studies of all the characters and painted them in black and white, and then I went in and added color on top of them. And it kind of looked like it kind of looked like that turtle piece where you saw I took a render and painted over it. I was like, why haven't I done this before? I don't know why. It went much faster. I didn't think I was going to make the deadline on that piece, because there were so many characters, and they all had to be layered so that it made sense. And also the colors they wanted them to be vibrant, but they also wanted it to feel kind of like a battlefield. So that's one of those things that I was like, I don't think I'm going to make it. I mean, I had someone earlier ask, what do you do when you think you're not going to be able to do it? It was scary, but I said, if I don't figure this out, I'm never going to have Marvel as a client. So you do it, Yeah, so that was the piece.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome, man.
Hi. I had the question, when you were working in a physical piece, you have an original, and that original has so much value because it's unique.
Yes.
How do you transition to working digitally, where you can reproduce your work 1,000 times if you want, but you lose that one piece that has so much value?
That was a thing that I used to worry about. All right, so one of the things that was nice when I first started as an illustrator is you would send in the painting, and they would use it for the magazine or whatever, and then they would send back your original along with the copies of the magazine, right? So you're right, you have an original piece there, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to sell this piece one day for $1,000. And guess what? I had a stack of originals that I never sold. So after a while, I kind of got over the idea of that. I don't know that the pieces are devalued the way that it kind of sounds by saying you can make 1,000 copies of it or whatever. Sure, you could do that if I was giving them out, but I still hold on to the original digital file. The client agrees that if they ever decide to reprint it, like that piece I did for the Michael Cera movie, they used it for movie posters. Later on, they decided they wanted to put it on the book, and so they had to come back and pay me again for that. So when you're doing different usages, you get paid multiple times, or you should if you have a good plan. One thing I didn't bring up with you guys is the agent. Remind me to get back on that because it's a good thing. With that, or even with something like sculpture, like this Black Panther, I plan to do a 3D print of him. Now, if I sold the digital file, people could print it a dime a dozen. But if I print it myself and sell that sculpture, then it has value again. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how you do it. You can control how your work is kind of put out there. Definitely. Hey.
Hi. I was wondering, because you said you studied graphic design, and how did you end up learning how maybe how the body is, like the proportions of the body, or maybe this program, Zbrush, did you do that like self-taught yourself, or did you find people who help you, or you studied somewhere else? Or
it's actually a little bit of both of what you just described there. So one thing I struggled with when I was younger was anatomy, and that was one of those things where I thought I knew what the body looked like, and I would draw what I thought the body, what it looked like, and it wasn't right. I thought I was killing it. I wasn't killing it. I was looking ridiculous. So what I did was I started to buy, Muscle and Fitness magazine, or I would look at. I ended up buying this statue. I use this now, actually. Right? Like I said, you're never done learning. So I got this anatomy. It's called Anatomy Tools statue, and it's a écorché of the body. So one half has the muscles, and the other half has it kind of peeled away to the lower muscles and the bone, and you get to see how everything connects and gets together and all that, and that really helped me. Before I would have, I wouldn't take into account that the pec, your chest muscle has to lay on top of the muscles that connect around it, and the tendons and all that, and it builds up those volumes that make it look real. Right? So there's things that if you're not thinking that way, and nobody really thinks that way unless, unless you're a maniac, nobody thinks of how all those things join together until you look at pictures and you look at diagrams and things like that, So, well, I talked so long I forgot what the question was. Did I answer it? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
Just maybe if you were always self-taught.
Yeah. Oh no, sorry. Okay, thank you. You gotta rein me in sometimes. So, no, I always bought books, so I taught myself. I did go to, I have taken. Actually, no, I was gonna say I took classes for it, but I did. I went on YouTube and looked at people who were teaching those kinds of things. I go on Gumroad and buy, like. Raphael Grassetti is really good. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him, but he's an amazing sculptor, and he has classes that you can buy for relatively little money, and just look at his process. Right? So between that, YouTube, normally YouTube can teach you anything, books and magazines, and then going on sites of the software manufacturers themselves. They show you how to do it. One thing I love about Wacom is they will get professionals and do, Wacom does this. They'll do like webinars, and I think I've done a couple. But they'll walk you through the process and open your eyes up to things that you didn't even think about. So that's how, it's self-taught. But I stood on the shoulders of a lot of giants to get here.
Hola.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
Just a comment.
Yes.
Al final de la clase vamos a regalar una Intuos, así que pongan mucha atención, sorpresa.
Okay, cool. Okay. Sure.
Hi. Hi. Sorry.
Hey. Where are we?
I'm here.
Oh, hey.
How do you deal with procrastination and routine?
How dare you? Procrastination is something I've never done in my life, ever. Yeah, no. I finished my presentation last night in the hotel. So, no, that's a problem, right? I mean, especially for creative people. We don't like to do things just to get them done. I have a daughter who, she's always been good about doing her homework, like as soon as she gets home from school. And she's always been the top at her class. And so I look at people like that and I'm like, wow, you did not get that from me. But yeah, the way you deal with it is it's usually one of those things where if it doesn't get done, something bad happens. So had I not finally gotten it together and figured out what I was going to say today, I would look ridiculous and I would probably get fired. You guys would all get angry at me. So that's the same way with clients, like you have that deadline. It always comes back to the deadline. If it doesn't get done and turned in on time, the way that these guys do it a lot of times is instead of saying, hey, this piece is due in 2 weeks, and so piece, come back when it's done, I'll talk to you later. What they'll do is they'll say, all right, we're going to have what's called milestones or check-ins. And they'll be like, okay, we want to see the sketch in a couple days, the rough sketch. We'll give you notes. You go back. You give us a clean line. A few days after that, you go back. And that way, they don't leave you to your own devices, which for me would be terrible because I would be like, okay, here's a sketch, and it's due tomorrow, and it wouldn't work. So you deal with it that way. It was procrastination. What was the other one?
Routine.
Routine. Oh, yeah. Well, routine for me is good because I'm a freelance artist and because I have different clients, the style of work changes. So I did that because I was working at a studio where I was doing the same type of T-shirts. We always had to churn out the same type of things. And it got really monotonous, and I got tired of it. And you could see it in my work, you know. So by working for myself, I can say, okay, look, I love painting and sculpting superheroes, but every once in a while I want to paint Ice Cube for the new Friday movie or whatever, you know. I can mix it up. Or I might want to paint Legos for the next, you know, toy or movie cover, whatever. So that's how it stays fresh, you know. It's one way to change it. And do stuff for yourself, too. So if you're doing something, like say you're doing something for class, and you've been working on it for a while, and it starts to get stale, or you start to get tired of it, you know, start doing something for yourself that's completely different.
Thank you.
You got it.
Okay. Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Here.
Hey.
Hi. Okay, so I have a question, real quick, but it's more for my sister than for me.
Okay.
I study marketing. I don't know any of these things. But so I have a sister that study animation, not here in this college, but she used to draw like more anime things, you know, Studio Ghibli things.
Yes.
But usually 2D. So well, for me, it's like a really good artist. She has a lot of stuff, and I wanted to ask you, how can she start like make money out of it, or if you think that it's necessary to do her things on 3D better than 2D or something?
She doesn't necessarily have to switch to 3D. I think that you can make a really good living as a 2D artist and never touch 3D. One thing I would suggest for her is to maybe get an Instagram page.
She has.
Okay, all right. So just really promoting that, like as a job, is...
I don't think that that's a job. I mean, it's more like fun to have like a digital portfolio.
Yeah.
But I don't think that she's like sending like her page to people like, hey, look like my artwork, so
right.
She can like start. She needs to start doing
that. I would. I mean, right now, social media has changed the game. So back in the day, you would have to send printed pieces or reels, you know, like demos of your stuff to studios, and I don't know. I mean, you're sending it out to, if you have any, you know, if you have any seriousness about it at all, you're sending it out to multiple studios a week, and they're getting, you know, hundreds of submissions from people, and it usually sits on someone's desk, an intern or somebody who goes through and decides who they're going to give it to look at it next. And so the process was really hard of getting noticed. I found that a lot. Like I almost decided I was going to give up as an illustrator when I was working that way because promotion just was not working for me. Nowadays, it's very easy to get your work in front of the right eyes with very little work. So if she's serious about being a 2D animator, then you know she can get her body of work together either on a site or on Instagram or whatever, put her best stuff on there, and she can start, when she posts a piece, hashtag it. So she's probably doing that already, but if she's looking through at the studios where she wants to work, like if she likes Studio Ghibli, if she likes whatever the equivalent of that is here or in the US or wherever, hashtag them, and then what will happen is that shows up in their feed, or anytime somebody does a search for, you know, this animated movie, her piece will pop up and she'll start getting noticed. So it's a really good way to kind of stealthily get your stuff in front of people, you know? Yeah, I would do that, definitely.
She also is like a super fan of Disney, but I mean, Disney, it's like a big company, so.
Disney's a machine, but I mean, that doesn't mean that you can't get in there, you know?
That's true.
Yeah, you definitely can get in there. They're always looking for new people, so you never know. She might be the one they're looking for.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
Hey, Mike.
Hey.
Well, I was wondering what's for you to, where would you like to work next? Or what do you want to create? Or who would you like to work for now?
So I would really like to, I would like to sculpt for a company like, say, Sideshow or Kotobukiya, some of the larger statue producers. Prime One is a really big one. So those guys, the thing about it is, like, I love statues, and I'm collecting them whenever I can afford it. I just got a Captain America that's amazing by Daniel Bell. When I go to Argentina, I get to meet Daniel Bell, one of my all-time favorite statue sculptors of all time, so I'm super psyched about that. But yeah, like, that's what I want to do for a living. I would love to get paid to do statues. I just actually did a couple that I did get paid for recently, but you know, as much as I love painting, I'm really starting to, you know, really enjoy sculpting, and I'd like to figure out a way to, you know, to get paid for that as well.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
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 I have two questions. The first one is, how was your transition from 2D to 3D, you know, from Photoshop to Zbrush? I'm now struggling with that.
Yeah.
And also, have you had, like, collaborations? Like, for example, I may say, like, comics. You know, you have the inker, you have the penciler, you have the colorist.
Yes.
Do you have those in 3D?
Definitely, definitely. So so the transition, first of all, was pretty smooth. Again, being able to work on it right on the screen definitely helps. So it's like I'm painting, you know what I mean? Like, as I go through and sculpt these volumes, I'm just pretty much painting them up. Because I had a traditional background, I always look at these guys who they can multitask, right? So you look at someone like Michelangelo who can draw and paint, and then he can, you know, sculpt as well. Those are the guys that I'm like, I want to be like those guys. I think that each one of those disciplines, I kind of think of it as, you know, almost like, this sounds silly, right? But like, almost like Kung Fu, right? They build off of one another. So, you know, if I get my drawing style down, then I can switch to my painting style, and that helps inform what my painting is going to look like. And so the same thing, it was just a natural progression. I took that into sculpture, and by being able to know what the shoulder should look like when you paint it, I know how to sculpt it, right? It kind of helps. So I know people who start in just one thing, and even people who start digitally who have never drawn on paper before. And I would say it just helps, you know what I mean? Like, obviously, you can do everything on the screen, but, you know, if you draw too, it's only going to make it better. So I know that there's a product now that I got when I was in China that's pretty cool. It's the what's the Wacom Tablet that has paper, and you draw on the paper and it shows up on the screen? You guys know what that's called?
Oh yeah, the one that scans the color, right? The pencil.
Yeah, well,
in live.
Yeah, it's like it almost looks like a notebook, but as you draw on it, it shows up on your monitor. It's a Wacom thing, but I got one. I just don't remember what the name of it is. But you draw on it with a pen. It's an actual pen. There it is. Boom, bamboo slate. That's it right there. Yeah, so you can do both things, right? You can get to see what it looks like on the pad, and then also it's on your screen. So if you want to go back in Photoshop and paint it, you can totally do that too. It's pretty dope. Yeah. What was it? Did the second question?
The collaboration part.
Oh yeah, yeah. Collaborations are great. So the great thing about my job is I get to meet a lot of people who are in the industry, like doing things. So there's a friend of mine named Danny Williams. He goes by the name Point Pusher, and he used to work at DreamWorks, and now he works for a company that they used to do Skylanders. I don't know, he does like video game stuff. He did like Crash Bandicoot and all that, but he does video games. Danny is awesome, and he's a really cool guy. So when I was in New York Comic-Con at the Wacom booth, I called him up because he's in New York. I was like, Danny, why don't you come through, man? Come sit in on a session. So he came for one of the shows. He did a set after me. We were live streaming each other, having a good time, right? So, but this guy is at the top of his form, and so I get to do those kind of things with him all the time. So I did a collabo with him. We just did a personal project. It was a comic book. I want to say it was Brother Man or something. It was one of these characters that we kind of just worked together on, and I get to do that with a lot of people who are really killing it. So that's always fun. Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. What can you tell us about money?
I like it. I'm a fan of money. That's it? Just
like the
I want
way
more. I would like more.
Or how do you charge your projects?
Oh,
or
sure.
Something like that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so it varies. I like how open that question was. That's pretty cool. Yeah, it varies per piece. So really, it's one of those things where you look at how much time it takes you to create a piece, how difficult it is, and you factor that into what you're happy with, right? So when I first started off as an artist, I had the problem that a lot of artists have, and it was low self-esteem, right? And I was like, well, I like this, but do you like it? I'll take whatever, you're going to give me that much? Okay. And then I got married, and my wife was like, are you crazy? So it helped to have somebody who would tell me, you're not valuing yourself. You need to charge what you're worth. And that's one of those things where as you become more experienced and more accomplished, you'll get the confidence to ask for what you want. And a lot of times companies will, they'll respect that more. I got a really good example of that, okay? So I did a piece for, it was for Vibe magazine, right? And it was Sean Puffy Combs and his girlfriend, Kim Porter. And she was pregnant at the time. And so she had, can I get internet through here? Can I pull up my site? All right, let me do this. I want to show you this piece. So she had, I did a piece of them together, and let me just pull it up here. All right, so there was a woman who did promotion who was friends with Puffy, and she showed it to him, and he wanted to buy it. Right? He wanted me to paint it as like a physical paint. Here it is right here, this piece. Okay? So he's like, I want that. I want to buy that. How much are you going to sell me that piece for? The artist part of me kicked in. And I was like, okay. I want to sell him this piece. He obviously has money, but I'm not gonna trip. I'm gonna charge something that I think is reasonable. So I told him, I was like, yeah, I can do it for you. It's gonna cost you $5,000. And he was like, $5,000? I said, yeah, $5,000. And I'm thinking I'm killing it, right? I'm like, businessman extraordinaire. So he goes, yeah, I don't want it anymore. I said, what? Why? He goes, if you're only charging $5,000 for this piece, that means anybody can have your work. He goes, I thought you were going to say like $60,000. And that was the worst I've ever felt in my life. So I was like, can I change my answer? He's like, no, I'm out. So, yeah, I know, right? It's terrible. But yeah, no, so you have to even, and I mean, I was pretty accomplished at that time. I was confident, but I was being practical, which was ridiculous with these guys. They love throwing money away. So now I know to ask for $100,000 and work my way back. Yeah, so that's it. Always ask for what you want. Yeah, it's important. Oh, agent. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, great. So one of the things you guys are going to run into is the question, should I get an agent or not if you're a freelance artist? And that's a really good question. It's also very personal. So I always thought that if I got an agent, I would become wildly successful and I wouldn't have to worry about charging, and I could do nothing but paint all day. I would get up and I would paint and I would eat and I would paint and I'd play video games and I'd go to bed, right? That was my routine. That was like the dream scenario. So I got an agent. I had two first, right, actually. First one I got was in the UK, and they handled a lot of artists. They had like 100 artists. So they would get me work in England, which was good because I wasn't there. So I was like, well, I'm not going to be getting this work anyway. They can get me work and I'll get paid. That didn't work out that well. One thing I learned was if you have 100 artists, then you're not really worried about any of them. So it's better to have an agent that has a small group of artists, right? So that was one thing I learned. So then I got an agent in New York, in Manhattan, big deal agent. And I'm like, okay, now I can paint and eat and play video games and go to bed. And what I found was this guy, he came on after I already had some pretty good clients. So I already had Coke, I had Infinity. Have you guys seen the Coke commercial? Because I can show it to you now if you want to see it. You want to see it? Okay. All right. Don't twist my arm. Hold on. Let's see. Coke. Oops. All right. Here it is. I have volume. Oh, I don't have volume. Oh. Okay, stop that. All right, let's do this again. So, bear in mind that I was much younger and more handsome, and I also look way more thuggish than I am in real life. So, that's a thing. Come on. Thank you. Too kind. Yeah, so anyway, no, I had Coke as a client already. I had some other pretty good clients. I think I was working with Warner Brothers by then. And so when I went to this agent, he was like, okay, you get to keep those clients, only I'm going to negotiate for you from now on, so I get a portion of the money that you get. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. So whatever I made, I had to give him 25%, and he was supposed to get me the most money for each project, and he was supposed to bring me all these new clients, and he didn't. So it was one of those things where I realized that I'm paying this guy for something I could do myself, and so I went back to just kind of grinding on my own and promoting myself, and I got rid of my agent. Now, that's not always going to be the case. I have another friend named Jason Seiler, who's one of the most amazing portrait artists I've ever seen. He actually did, he painted the Pope for the cover of Time magazine, which was a super big deal. Like Time magazine, if you're painting magazines and you can get Time magazine cover, that's one of those ones that is rare. So they use him for that. He's done a million political things. He's really dope. But he has an agent, and this guy is, well, but you know what? I'm going to change the subject. He loves his agent, and everything is great. So, yeah, choose for yourself. Yeah, what am I doing? I'm not going to talk about that. He loves his agent. They're like this. So, anyway, yeah, that's the agent thing. It's really up to you. You know, some people enjoy it. But if you want to keep your money, which is really a good thing, you got to think about it. I don't know how taxes work here. Are they taxes here? Yeah. Okay. So sorry, I'm not very cultured. Yeah. So you know that the government's taking part of your money anyway. So if you're giving part of it away to your agent, then how much are you left with at the end of the day? So I like to keep mine. Yeah. Let me actually get some work done.
Why should I buy a Wacom Tablet instead of an iPad Pro?
So, first of all, that's a dangerous question. No. So I was talking about that this morning, actually, at breakfast. I mean, there's a lot of cheaper alternatives, but the thing about it is they're cheaper alternatives, right? So I've used some of these things just to see what they're like. I personally have owned Wacom tablets forever, but I did want to see what what's the intrigue. I know that sometimes your budget may not be enough to get what you really want. I tried them, and they don't feel the same. You know what I mean? It's like having a luxury car and going from a luxury car to having a cheap car. If you've already been in the Mercedes or the BMW, and then you go and you get into a Hyundai, you're going to feel the difference, right? So the build quality is different. The levels of pressure are different. I joke around with some of my friends at Wacom sometimes that they always keep adding levels of pressure sensitivity, and I'm like, when's it enough? When do you have enough levels? But I use it, and I'm like, okay, you're doing the right thing. Keep adding more levels of pressure sensitivity, I guess. It feels more and more like the real deal. But yeah, I would say try using the one you're talking about, and then try using one of these over here, and you tell me.
Well, besides the budget, I mean, iPad Pro is over $1,000, and I know that the Wacom tablets, you get them at different price points.
Uh-huh.
So what's the main difference? Besides the programs that you can use with the tablets, do they feel different? And I don't know, what's your opinion about it?
I haven't used the one that you're talking about. I have used some of the other competitors, and I definitely felt the difference. The stylus is a really big deal. So I know that when I was younger, before I bought my first Intuos, I tried one of the early competitors, and they had like batteries in the stylus, and they were in the back of the thing, so the weight of it was weird, and it was always felt like it was going to fall over and things. Like, I don't know how that works now with these other guys, but it just, you gotta try it out. Like I personally have used, like I said, 2 other brands, and then I've used this, and I own this, right? So that tells you a lot. This is what I use every day. And if I have a project that I'm doing for a client that is going to be, thousands of dollars, this is what I trust. And I know the other things are probably compatible too, but I never have driver issues. That's a big thing. I know that sometimes Windows comes out. I used to be a Mac guy. I was using Mac all the time, and I never had to think about drivers, but sometimes Windows comes out with an update that kind of throws you a loop. It's usually pretty stable, or Wacom will come out with an update that'll fix whatever issues it is, real like that. So you gotta see if the company is willing to support you like these guys do. That's it.
Mike?
Yes.
I have a question too. Well, I think it's really common that at least it's my personal case that I started drawing and I want to do like everything, storytelling, storyboards, animation, illustration.
Yeah.
And many people told me that it was better to focus just in one thing and get better in just one thing because now my portfolio is like super messy.
Oh.
Yeah, and I don't know if I want to do that or just, like work on all this stuff.
Well, that's a really interesting dilemma, right? I mean, if you enjoy doing all those things, then I wouldn't tell you not to do them. I would say find out what you enjoy the most, because, I mean, obviously one of those things is going to make you more happy than the others, right? You can still do them all in your personal time, but if you know for a fact that you enjoy animation more than storyboarding, or vice versa, you would, I would say concentrate on building a really strong portfolio of the thing that you enjoy the most, and that's what you present. Or another thing you could do is have multiple portfolios. So you have one that's just storyboarding, right? And then you have one that's, a reel for animations or stills from your animations, or one that's illustration, whatever the case may be. And you can have a few different things. You can have a few different, even if you have them on like your site or your Instagram or whatever, I would present to the client and say, look, I'm very good at this thing. This is what I want to, you to consider me for, and here's my body of work. And they can look at it, and it's more focused than having a whole hodgepodge of things, because that's one thing a creative director doesn't want to see. They don't want to see like that you have split allegiances between these different things. They want the best person for whatever it is they need. So they'll call me when they want, look, we know you can sculpt and all that, but we want an illustration and we don't want to have to worry about it. So we're calling you. And I'll be like, okay, I'll do it for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, you want to focus.
Hi.
Hi.
How do you manage to work when you feel uninspired? Like, do you ever get like in a funk and just like can't?
Yeah, I do actually. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does sometimes. So there's generally when I'm working on something, I'll do the thing that I enjoy the most first, and that will be something that you can see it in the work. So if there's something that's going to be either more challenging but maybe a little more monotonous, or like a perfect example is I'm working on this piece now that I get to do all these fun parts of it. It's NDA, so I can't talk about it, but I get to do all these fun parts of it, and then there's one thing that's very technical. It's got a lot of little bits and parts and things like that, and so I did the fun part first and turned that in, and then eventually when I ran out of fun things to do, I went back and circled back to the thing that I kind of was saving till the end. And it still has to be turned in with everything else, and I had to do it before this trip. So guess what I was doing right before I came on this trip? It's one of those things where it's not fun, but you got to do it. It's like a job. And again, you don't want it to be your job. I tell people this all the time. So I picked a profession that allows me to do what I love, right? And there's an old saying that if you do what you love for a living, you never work a day in your life. And that's how I feel. Like I feel like I've never had to work. Like I've played and I've gotten paid for it. So, think of that.
Thanks.
Yep, you're welcome.
Mike.
Yes.
Me again.
Hi. Hey.
Coming back to the topic of money. You mentioned that you had a piece that you have made, and then later on somebody came back to you to pay you royalties to use it again.
Yes.
How do you put that in? Do you deal with that at the very beginning when you use it? Do you set it a contract? And do you negotiate a flat rate, or do you negotiate like a percentage per item sold? How do you manage the ranges? How to charge for it? Or are there laws? Do you set it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I have a lot of friends that work on an hourly rate. I don't do that because I tend to spend more time on a piece than I would kind of admit to. So what I normally do is I charge per piece. And so give you an example, I just did a sculpture, and it's going to be used for this movie. And the character, everything in it was new for me, right? Like I'm sculpting things that I've never sculpted before, like wings and, you know, this, that, and the other. And so I knew it was going to be time consuming. On that piece, the client was more comfortable with an hourly rate. So I was like, okay, and I made up one and I gave it to him. And I kind of figured that out by saying, I know for a fact that it would take me a month to do this piece, right? So I'm going to take the price that I would be happy for a month and divide it per week, and then I'll divide that per day, and I'll divide that per hour, and that's how I got my hourly rate, right? So I gave it to them. They were cool with it. Turned out that the client was perfectly happy to keep me on. It was only supposed to be for a month. They kept me on for 2.5 months. So that was great for me. And the client was super happy because I ended up doing 2 sculpts for them instead of 1. So the rate, I would just say, again, it's one of those things where you have to be able to go to bed at night and not think, am I ripping myself off, you know? So personally, I would rather, because I came from that T-shirt field, it was one of those questions where everybody back when I was doing T-shirts wanted to pay you in residuals. They were like, oh, well, you know, I give you, $200 for this shirt, and then if I keep selling it, you keep getting paid, and eventually you'll make $1 million. And I was like, yeah, that's not how that works. And also that person has the ability to say, well, we didn't sell any this week, so I don't have anything for you, even if they're selling it out, you know? So what I did at that point was I was like, all right, look, I just want to assess a piece, figure out what it's worth to me, charge that up front, and they can, give me half at the beginning and half on completion. That's another way that I like to work, because then the client has skin in the game, and so do I, right? I got half my money, but they know I have a commitment to do the piece, and I don't get the rest until it's over with. So that's how I work usually, flat rate.
In regarding royalties, how do you negotiate those?
Yeah, for royalties, so when I was doing the piece that I mentioned to you, that was for a client that deals specifically with movie and television. So they went back and said, when I gave them the original piece, we have like a boilerplate contract that I signed at the beginning that says this piece, and even in my invoices, I say this piece is for one-time usage for this thing, right? You can use it for this movie poster. If you want to use it for something else, it's fine, but you got to come back to me and I got to get paid again. So most people don't have a problem with that. And so that's how it is.
Okay. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Hey, Mike.
Hey. Hey.
Yeah, I wanted to know, you've talked about all this success and all this, pushing through and whatever, but I've always thought that you can never be the best in everything. Like, you have to just turn out some things. And I was wondering, what are those things that you have to give up to become such a huge thing, dope thing like yourself?
Oh, thank you, first of all.
How do you manage your family and your friends and this? Because I think if you're pursuing money, you have to give up on a lot of things.
Yeah.
And like for myself, it's never worth it, you know, because you can never buy another second with your kid, or they're just growing up, and you know, like, who's dad? Like, I don't know. He's a dope guy, but I don't know him. Like,
you're right. No, you're right. That's real. That's very real. So I will admit that there have been projects that I've been chained to my computer, and I didn't necessarily get to go on the weekend vacation. And now my kids are grown. You know what I mean? Like, my daughter's in college. My son is a junior in high school, and they're doing grown kid things. They don't really want to be tethered to their parents now. They're becoming young adults and living their own life with their friends and all that. So that's very, like, that's a bummer, man. Why'd you hit me with that? That's not cool. Ah, man. Yeah, no. So, yeah, but you're right. It's one of those things where you have to choose. Now, the choice that I made was, I can do this job, and I can do it really well, and I can get, a nice payday from it, and I can also up my reputation and get more clients and charge more for my next job, or I can turn it down and I can go hang out at the beach for the weekend with the family, which would have been a great alternative. But at the end of the day, the money that we made, we invested, right? And that money grew, and now that money is going towards my daughter's first year of college. So, I just had to pay $12,000 last week for first quarter, which killed me. But guess what? I had the money. So, 6 on one hand, half a dozen on the other. You know what I mean? I know that you can't get that time back, but now what I can do is, I'm in a position now where I'm spending more time with my kids when I can, and they're older and we can relate more. And I tell them, I'm like, look, man, I didn't go with you on this thing, and I'm sorry, I feel bad about that. And he's like, look, we're spending time together now, so it's never too late to do that. But you made it real, brother. You made it real. Thank you for that. Cheers.
Cheers. Bueno, señores, muchas gracias, de verdad. Nos da un placer tener a Mike aquí con ustedes. Démosle un fuerte aplauso, por favor. Gracias. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
I think we're done. We're going to do some... ITESO tiene una cortesía, so they're going to give you some giveaways from the university.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah.
T-shirt.
Thank you.
Aplauso para Mike, que estuvo aquí. Espero hayan imaginado, creado y aprendido mucho con Mike. De verdad nos da mucho gusto. Para los que tenían preguntas en relación al producto, tenemos lo que se mencionó al principio, promociones. Se pueden acercar al booth que está allá. Les van a dar la información. Pueden probar los productos de Wacom. Okay. Y muchas gracias, de verdad. Bienvenidos y adelante. Gracias. Van a dar la tablet que se ofreció.
Chicos, Mike les va a hacer una pregunta. El que la conteste se gana una Intus.
Okay. Wait, I'm choosing? Oh, that's a lot of pressure. Okay. How do I know? Just random? Oh, man, I don't want to do that. You gotta be in the spot. Jeez.
Come to the light.
Oh, man. This was fun until right this second. Yeah. Now it's not fun.
Just do it based on your presentation.
Oh, okay.
Your clients or
okay.
Your first Wacom product.
Your first Wacom product. Okay. All right. First of all, who does not have a Wacom product right now? And be truthful. All right, that's a lot more hands than I saw earlier. Okay.
You're thinking too hard, Mike.
All right. Random question.
Based on your career.
Okay. Oh, on what I just said? Yeah. Okay, all right. Okay, how about this? Let me think. Did I say which character that my dad brought the comics home? Did I say that? Does anybody remember?
Wacom hero that you just made for us.
About Black Panther? Oh, now you're stumping me. Okay. Man, I don't like this. All right. What was the name of the first company that I said I work for creating T-shirts? Whoever has an answer for that. Okay, I see a few hands. Now let me guess. Right there. Your hand right there with the... Yes. What's the answer? Carell? Oh, Echo?
Echo.
Yes. You got it right. Okay, you won.
Tenemos un ganador.
Nice. You got to come up here. Here.
Una foto.
Yes.
Photo with the winner.
Okay.
And that's it.
All right. We're going to do a photo? Okay.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Felicitaciones. Otro aplauso, por favor. Ganó. Estuvo difícil esa.
All right.
Bueno, ya por último, los que se quieran tomar una foto o un autógrafo con Mike, del lado izquierdo va a estar sentado. Los que tengan todavía tiempo, con todo gusto. Pero hay 4 chicos, 4 niños que queremos que sean primero porque es Mike y se tienen que ir seguramente. Entonces, que pasen primero los chicos y hagan línea aquí y no hay ningún problema. So we're gonna do the
sign. Okay.
Gracias por todo, chicos.
I have a Sharpie I brought. Let me get my Sharpie.